DSA and Democrat Discourse. The online left is going through another internal battle with the far left, but this time it's not over Israel. It's over whether DSA members and ideas should be accepted into the mainstream Democratic platform. All of this is set in the wake of Mamdani-backed candidates winning in New York elections, and Hassan being invited to give a speech at the College Democrats of America event, dressed up as Mao. So naturally, this triggers major divisions in discourse again. Creators and pundits of all kinds are drawing lines and drawing swords, with some disavowing and some hesitant and even placating. And then there are others who just outright support them.
To talk about the larger Democratic Party post the election in Michigan going forward, I am not going to be in the same party with Hassan Piker. I can tell you that right now. If he becomes a force in the Democratic Party, I'm out of here. I have no intention of ever being in the same political party with that guy. If he becomes a force in the Democratic Party, I'm out of here.
Well, I hate to tell you, he already is. He's already campaigned for a shitload of candidates, and I think most of them have ended up winning. If this guy becomes a force in Democratic politics, I'm not going to be with the party anymore. Well, is this your way of saying you've already left the party? Because if you haven't, you might as well get on that because it's done, bro.
I'll join. I know many of my listeners are already in DSA, and I spoke to people at the Green event last weekend that were also in DSA. I used to be in DSA, and I said at the end of my last episode that I believe it would behoove me to rejoin the MDC DSA. That being said, do you think that basically we should all join DSA and do DSA entryism in order to help the DSA? I mean, those of us, and it sounds like you agree with me, who wish DSA had a little bit more like democratic centralism, a little bit more ideological purity, for lack of a better word, even if it meant it were smaller. And this is a big thing, by the way, because a lot of times when I'm having these conversations, a certain kind, not all DSAers, but a certain kind of DSAer will say to me, okay, but the DSA is so big and Socialist Alternative is small. So nanny boo boo, and the argument that someone like Shama makes is that we would prefer a smaller organization to people who have ideological consistency, who are willing to really invest in a discrete and concrete goal. And that's how we were able to get a centrist Democratic council, city council in Seattle to bend the knee to us, because they couldn't walk down the street without hearing it from us.
And during all this discourse, there seems to be an inability to really determine where the line needs to be drawn. There is this confusion over exactly what socialism is, who isn't or is part of the DSA, and even attempts to negotiate whether or not they're even a threat to begin with. And the confusion just goes deeper because everybody is on board with disavowing Trump and MAGA and kind of bizarrely claiming that they're worse than the DSA. So it just blurs the lines even more. This whole debate is deeply disillusioned. It's a struggle session of sorts. Not to mention, because it plays out online, all of this is managed by clout and attention, where everybody is relying on reputations and insults, and the most convincing litmus test is the Hassan dog shocking question.
And is that correct? Do you identify as a liberal? Are you a socialist? Like, how do you?
Yeah, liberal. Yeah,
liberal. So this group and this ideology that undermines capitalism and liberalism, does that concern you at all, joining a local chapter?
No, I mean, I think I personally think capitalism capitalism deserves to be undermined. I don't think it is serving us as best it could right now. We used to regulate shit. We used to regulate things. I like to get into regulation again. So yes, I think that what is Wick Guy is very dramatic.
Well, Keith, are you masking on right now? Like, can you just tell us what your real position is?
All of it right now. Did Hassan Piker shock his dog?
What?
Did Hassan Piker shock his dog?
He says he didn't. No.
He says he didn't.
What are we doing here?
Anyway,
Let's
I just need. That's all I needed.
I don't
Okay,
know
guys,
if
I
does
gotta
Keith
go.
traffic
I
in
love
that.
you all.
Keith, I don't. Do you like follow like Hassan?
I have no idea
Drama?
what that.
Okay,
I don't know.
Wick,
fair
ask
enough.
him a different question because
Sure.
that's
Do you
a
think?
bit more
Do you think
niche.
Hassan
He failed.
Piker
The answer
is
is yes.
a? Do you think Hassan Piker is a threat to the Democratic Party?
No.
Okay. Yep. That's all I needed. Okay.
And despite this very funny way to sniff out naysayers, it's not going to convince regular people. They're not deep into online political lore. They're focused on real issues and the ability of candidates to set real goals. It's not something that will translate to the real world and provide legitimacy. You cannot have two progressive candidates on stage asking each other, did Hassan shock his dog? Well, I'm not entirely sure. You know, the reason that much of this type of discourse and kind of the democratic attitude in general is struggling is because all of this is negative argumentation. It feeds and plays well into the algorithm and attention grabbing, but it fails to appropriately address the issue. Where do we draw the line? At what point do you stop letting animals into the hen house? Right? You can let in a few ducks, maybe a few pigs, but you cannot let in any foxes. The more legitimate and long-term way to distinguish this is through positive argumentation. There needs to be something argued for. There needs to be a case in favor of something, not solely against something. The need for positive argumentation. With the way our minds work, all these ideas, these groups, these associations are all held together within a sort of loose internalized narrative. And these internalized narratives shape the world itself for us, the way we experience it. You can think of it like watching a TV drama. You know, as we watch, we're holding it together all these bits of information. You know, we're catching on some clues and maybe missing some others, but what's forming in our minds is this internalized narrative. We can also sort of check this narrative against others, so to speak, peeking and stealing answers from somebody else's test, right, in a way. A lot of this becomes much more apparent when something very shocking takes place, something that shatters or forces this realignment of the narrative, right? In your own life, if somebody, you know, cheats on their significant other, or a couple, you know, breaks up or gets a divorce, that's a very shattering thing. In Game of Thrones, the Red Wedding is still deep within everybody's psychology, just killing off tons of characters. And even within more generic things like Andrew Tate's sudden arrest and extradition, he's now no longer just some guy on the internet. There's something allegedly more malicious going on. All of these internalized narratives that we're drawing upon, relying upon, they have to make sense to us, right? They need to be oriented correctly, because we're just not talking about drama in our lives or on TV. We're talking about complex political ideas. These require narratives as well. And the more abstract these ideas are, the more there is a need for positive and negative argumentation. This is because the positive is meant to convince you, to draw you in towards that idea. You can feel the pull. 20% store-wide clearance sale. I'm sitting there thinking, my God, what a steal. In politics, you hear very often, we need to provide more money to working class families who are struggling with high prices and daycare costs. so they can work with a peace of mind. This is meant to make you feel empathy and want to help and give that money. You are drawn to that position. And even in more benign sense, we'd like to dedicate this new statue in Central Park to the veterans who sacrificed and tragically lost their lives in the war. There is this draw towards veneration of the statue and kind of remembrance. It pulls you in. On the other side, the negative is meant to distance and ostracize. Oh my God, did you see the shoes she was wearing? Essentially, anything Mean Girls at its core. Things like they are targeting minorities to remove their rights. There is this implicit othering and pushing away within these statements. They were embezzling funds into offshore accounts they owned, right? That's like, get that guy out of office. And when you think about all these sort of just random statements or anything, you can feel the push and pull within them. And you can see how both sides are required to form these properly oriented narratives. Now, bringing this back to the topic, you can see why the Dems and the DSA are in this ongoing struggle. Because simply for the Dems to just be calling the DSA ideologues and stupid and immature or resentful or envious and just forever vibe checking them is only going to keep slowly eroding the way the group they are trying to defend. They are never going to be able to gain more ground and draw people. They are never going to be able to reach to the people who are on the fence, the people they really need to keep out of the DSA camp. And what will happen is that if you continue to refuse to make arguments, the fringe is going to merge with this block. And this block will become something you cannot ignore. It will be a tail wagging the dog situation. The DSA, or whatever crazy, kooky kind of position you want to talk about, they are making a case. They are trying to pull people to their camp. They are branding themselves a superior version of the moderate. It's not just a public option, it's Medicare for all. And in order to begin making positive arguments, the Democrats have not sufficiently dug down to the core of what the disagreement is over. Because at the heart of it, this disagreement is over what economics is trying to solve to begin with. And that is the tragedy of the commons. Tragedy and hope of the commons. To start, this issue is represented like a watering hole. It's a place where everybody can come to fish and eat and stay alive. If everybody rushes in and fishes out all the fish, then everybody will eventually die and starve. Not too fun. So what happens is we have to set some ground rules to try and manage this watering hole, right? Or rules manifest out of the dynamic, so to speak. In a modern sense, the two ways we typically think of this is, one, we let private owners come in and manage the fish population and they just sell it to the rest of us. And then two, we let the government come in and tell everybody to distribute the fish. So bear with me a second, because that's a lot of philosophy shrunk down into 30 seconds. What is missing from the conversation is that the common resource that everybody is disagreeing over here is not something like food, cattle, grain, water, clothing, or oil. It's not even housing. The issue that the Democrats and the DSA fundamentally disagree over is human labor. In an economic sense, all of those goods and services do not get priced, regulated, subsidized, whatever it is, until we discern what to do about human labor. In almost any business, the largest expenditure is labor, because fundamentally, all these activities require some level of it. And this dynamic of negotiating the price of labor is just like the water hole, right? If we think about individual workers trying to get a job, like the fish, and all of the fishermen rushing up to the watering hole, like businesses, because they need labor, right? Somebody has to do something. And of course, there are caveats, right? We set rules so that the fishermen can't overfish or throw back dying catch or dump trash into the water. These are all kind of standard negotiated things within society. But for the Democrats, as long as you believe businesses and people can and should reasonably negotiate that price, you are a capitalist. If you want houses built, it takes labor to lay the brick, to put the floorboards. If you want food in the grocery stores, it takes labor to stack shelves and remove the expired products. And regardless of whatever exceptions or rules you want to put in place, you have to view all other dynamics downstream from this one, because the socialists, the communists, the Marxists, they will never agree with you on this. They want to violate this negotiation. They want to destroy it. It doesn't matter if it's through democracy getting elected or by force. Their end goal is the same. In practicality, this doesn't mean that every single argument for the rest of time needs to be derived from this dynamic. But if you cannot add leverage to your position, if you cannot create this split on economics, you won't be able to pull in voters from both left and right even. Instead, the hyper-democratic centers are going to move more extreme. The lines are going to stay blurred. The regular voter is not going to be able to tell much of a difference between a well-regulated socialist and a very progressive capitalist. There has to be more to offer on the table than a socialist who supports Gaza versus a socialist who supports Israel. You have to distinguish that. Something like a capitalist who values regulation or a capitalist who values dignity in the workplace is going to cast a wider net. It just is. It's also very natural and relatable for regular voters because they interact with all of these capitalist incentives on a daily basis. They're buying groceries, they're buying gas, they're buying cars, houses. People inherently are valuing all of these propositions as the best bang for their buck. They can evaluate their own individual needs regarding wages, housing, and retirement. These are all things that people negotiate and do. And what needs to happen is you have to see how the solutions to many of these issues can be explored with options via free markets.
The fact that many people believe the problem with expensive housing is too much capitalism, but you write, quote, "You could completely eliminate the capitalistic aspects of this housing system and all the problems would recur." Explain what you mean by that.
Yeah, so I mean, you can define these words in different ways, right? But housing in America is definitely capitalistic, right? You have for-profit companies building homes, you have people seeking investment, we have banks making mortgage loans, right? It's all capitalism. But it's very much not a free market. It's one of it's probably the single most regulated sector in America. You have a higher odds of getting permission from the government, to build a new kind of airplane than to put an apartment building up in a suburban neighborhood. And it's that lack of freedom that has created all of this scarcity.
Right? Because if you make this split, the DSA will no longer be able to subvert the party. There would be clear outsiders. Far left progressives would have to align themselves either inside or outside the capitalist framework. You would no longer get Bernie Sanders muddying the waters with words like socialism, calling capitalist countries socialists, right? The conversation immediately becomes, yes, I want free markets, but ones that empower people to negotiate their best wages and to have protections X, Y, Z. This creates a clear line that delineates and forms a boundary, removing the taboo of seeing behind the socialist curtain, knowing who and who should not be cast out. I mean, in another way, this means propagandizing capitalism to be a good thing, to have positive association, when it already does for a lot of people. And it's strange because these are the very incentives and mechanisms that have propelled liberal politics to the forefront over the last 100 years. The significant increases in material well-being, the regulation and removal of negative dynamics and incentives, things like having labor laws, minimum wages, trying to create different forms of taxation. All of these things that the socialists love to cling to were done by capitalists for capitalists. This is the core of the liberal project. And yet, despite this, capitalism is this dirty word. It has become this weird, guilt-ridden flagellation ritual that has advanced so far that within 20 to 30 years, the needle has moved from we cannot even call ourselves liberals to we can't even call ourselves pro-capitalist. If influencers, experts, politicians, and media figures begin drawing this line, it will more clearly align the candidates. And obviously, I believe me, that the voting base would follow because in reality, most people are not secret communists. The standard is not capitalism. The standard is abject poverty for 99% of people. For all the online politics, debates, posturing, this candidate versus that candidate, Israel, Palestine, pro-life, pro-choice, pro-gun, anti-gun, or whatever issue you want to claim, the historical view remains. The benefit of capitalism is that it has mainstreamed personal wealth and even excess personal wealth. Not just available food, available housing, or personal liberty, but genuine wealth generated from your own labor. These types of narratives are ones that Democrats need to cling to and promote because they're not only hopeful, but triumphant. It provides something that people actually want to vote for and believe in. It's a narrative that grounds the pundits and it draws in the normie class, so to speak. And more importantly, it's just true. I learned a lot. Hopefully you guys did too. Catch you guys in the next one.